Okay, and I'm Locky from the Center for Applied English Studies at in the University of Hong Kong. Now, I have a very simple content with four main things. First is what is creativity, and second one, I will be introducing the creativity in register cube framework. The third one will be an analytical framework for creativity in multimodal text, and then finally a conclusion. So, I think the big question is what is creativity in the first place, right? Now, I'll be comparing the definitions of creativity in applied linguistics versus that in systemic functional linguistics. So we have to start with the definitions from applied linguistics first, because, well, as we know that in systemic functional linguistics, we don't have a term called creativity, or not very well known at least. So in applied linguistics, creativity is defined as the interplay between the forming and reforming of patterns, according to Carter, 2004, in a text of any medium. So as you can see from the Venn diagram, creativity is basically the big brother of multimodal creativity, linguistic creativity, and verbal creativity. Now, multimodal creativity, as the word goes, is a combination of various modes. For example, in cinematography, painting, sculptures, it can refer to body language, gaze, depth of field, color, camera angle, acting performance. In music and songs, it can be the rhythm, the beats, the key, the tempo, the vocal lyrics. And digital arts can be the algorithm, the color, strokes, fonts, graphic symbols, and visualizations, of course. Then, so in the general, the foci will be the interrelations between semiotic resources in construing creativity. As for linguistic creativity, would be considered as those in spoken and written, and are definitely language related. For example, if we're going back to the telecinematography, it would be the scripts or dialogues. Music and songs will be about the lyrics. And the general foci for that will be looking at repetitions of lexical items in co-constructed conversation according to Tenon, looking at neologisms, word blend, metaphor, and other various forms of figure of speech and wordplay, according to Carter, 2004. Now, so verbal creativity might be the one that we SFL linguists are most familiar with because it's related to spoken. For example, in speech, we can be looking at monologues of public speeches or dialogues of everyday common talk. Even in applied linguistics, the general approach would be qualitative. And if it's involving corpus or corpora, then it will be looking at these text transcribed speeches. So, what about creativity in SFL? So in SFL, it's not officially defined until a couple of years ago when I did it. So, and it was at least acknowledged by Michael Halliday in his foreword for Carter's book called "Language and Creativity: The Arts of Common Talk." So in that part, as you can see in the screen capture, that is exactly Michael Halliday's foreword for that book. And so I quote it here. In this new book, Ronald Carter examines the notion of creativity as it appears in different cultural and historical contexts. So I thought that was quite a good starting point to look at creativity and what it means in SFL. Well, if I'm going to put that applied linguistic definition into SFL, then creativity would be somewhere that is about something that's about simulgenesis and intertextuality. So in SFL term, if we're looking at figure 2, we can see that these are the time frames of simulgenesis and the relationships in the kind of instantiation. So what creativity would be is that when it is instantiated at the context of situation, and so it has undergone changes brought about by phylogenesis, and then up to ontogenesis, and then up to logogenesis. When it reaches the logogenetic stage, where meanings are being created, reinforced, and even altered by a user's language choices to reach a target audience. So we follow that green arrow up the kind of instantiations by Matheson's 2010. Also, because mentioned that intertextuality is also involved. So, according to Lemke, 1985, we identified that intertextuality as dependence of one text upon another. And so, what that means is we can look at then the historical or so-called semiotic history of the often hidden dialogues that is usually engaged in another text or texts, even as a whole discursive tradition, as Halliday and Webster 2009 mentioned. So we're looking at this path that goes up, and we're looking at the semiotic changes, we're looking at the semiotic histories, and we're looking at the dependence of one text upon another one. So we have these few concepts to begin with, but actually, in actual sense, the creativity has not yet been very well defined. Halliday, 1976, talked about anti-language, which was something that's pretty similar to this concept of creativity. Now, I've just included various quotes from his paper. I'm not going to read everything, so I'm just going to leave it the screen for you for a moment. You can have a look at it. Right. So I hope you have had enough time to have a look at it. I have highlighted or actually changed the color of some of the keywords that are going to be relevant for this presentation. We're looking at how new words are used for or in place of the old, or old words that has been relexicalized or over-lexicalized to give different meanings. We're looking at foregrounding, which is mostly related to interpersonal meanings. We're looking at the fact that it creates an alternative reality, and also
recording in progress.
How it opposes established norms. Right. So I'm just including this diagram here for you if you are interested in the difference between language and anti-language by Halliday. And so you can, as you can see, basically they still merge to an idealized thesis called language, but in fact they operate in very different dimensions, if you like. And according to the quote as well, Halliday mentioned that it is kind of like a metaphorical variance. It's a metaphor for an everyday language that has the metaphorical quality appearing all the way up and down the system, including phonological, grammatical, morphological, lexical, and also perhaps syntactic and semantics, obviously. So it's a metaphorical modes of expression that are the norm for this kind of language or this kind of anti-language. And if we talk about verbal creativity, in the very core, we cannot omit that Hasan has a model for verbal art, and also included figure 4 for you to have a look at it. But basically, Hasan's model is based on literary text. Therefore, for example, literature, poems, and so literary text uses second-order semiosis, where non-literary texts do not. And therefore, this model is not actually compatible with everything that is non-literary. And that is opposed to Carter's view on creativity, where even common talk or everyday speech can be creative. Right, and so basically that's all the SFL literature that's been covered so far if we want to talk about creativity in applied linguistics. Obviously, then, therefore, research gap is very clear that creativity in spoken language is, according to Carter, is never just a matter of words. And there are possibilities for examining various degrees of creativity. And then that's his comment on talking about multimodality. So Carter knows that the talk about theories and models on creativity in terms of multimodality is missing. According to Halliday and Hasan, their models are good in describing verbal speeches or verbal art, but we're still missing a very solid foundation or theory for that. So SFL really needs a model or framework for describing creativity in general. And what I mean by in general is includes everything verbal creativity, linguistics creativity, multimodal creativity as well. So then I began my project basically a few years ago, and I came up with my analytical frameworks for creativity. In my PhD thesis, I basically started everything from ground up. I had a big corpus, so I need to look at extractions of linguistic creativity to begin with, because words are easy to start. And then from the words, I moved to, or actually, I continued with that work, and then I needed some multimodal frameworks. So I created the Creativity Register Cube framework. And after that, I also needed something for qualitative analysis. So I invented an analytical framework for creativity in multimodal text. And this is a table that basically summarizes all my framework approaches, analysis type, concepts, and inspirations, where I got that from, and my work on these models or frameworks. Today, I'm going to mainly focus on the ones that are related to digital creativity multimodal analysis, DCMA, because they are, well, they are for SFL linguists. As for the corpus linguistics one, I would just leave it for another conference. We'll start with the first one, because I now call it CIRCF in short. Basically, the text type that's involved, it's from the speech, and then I can go to the video and retrieve data. This is a mainly quantitative method. It's multidimensional, focusing on representation, and also on the concept of dimension reductions. Right, and so we start with the first one, from interactive speech to video. Like you saw in the table, basically I started with the idea that came from Carter, his creativity matrix of everyday spoken creativity. Basically, he had the Henkel corpus, and he looked at the instances in quantitative term. But when he did the analysis, obviously he had to go for a qualitative approach. So he had this matrix where if you look horizontally, you can see context types and interaction type. If you look down, you can see there is the transactional, professional, socializing, and intimate. And within that, you can see there is like other more minor tasks like informal information provision and collaborative task and collaborative idea. What I actually added in was the second one. I'll come back to this one again. So as I was doing research, I also found that Poynton, 1985, she had this concept called three continua of tenor, which involves power, contact, and affective involvement. And later then I found out it's actually a pre-model of the appraisal by Jim Martin. But well, since we have it here, power equal to unequal, contact frequent to occasional, in affective involvement high to low. So what that does is what I saw is it really fits into Carter's creativity matrix. And if I look horizontally, I can see an increasing level of equality or power, or decreasing power. If I look down the column, I can see there is an increasing level of intimacy or affective involvement. If I look diagonally, I can see that is an increasing level of contact. Now, I have these numbers here that doesn't actually belong to Carter's work, because in actual Carter's work, he has a lot of actual examples put into these cells. So I'm just taking them out and making it maybe slightly relevant to this talk. And then, so after I see that these two can be merged together, I assign these 12 numbers. I just call them like grid number. And so this will actually help me to do dimension reduction later on if I have a lot of parameters. And so Carter, Poynton, finally, it's Matheson's registerial cartography, focusing on the field. Now, in his theory, in his model, he has these 8 permeable fields of activity. or if you like, social semiotic processes within a context. So what happens is, if I have enough data and I can analyze each of the instances of the creativity, I can actually turn all that or combine all that into a three-dimensional model. Where if you look at this bigger graph here, you can see that affective involvement becomes the x-axis, and then so it becomes the x-axis, and then power becomes the y-axis, and then contact becomes the z-axis. So we have when we plot these data on this three-dimensional graph, we can have a kind of creativity where we can see how power, contact, and affective involvement are related to the concept of creativity. And under the kind of creativity, if we want, we can actually plot these rainbow color, which then represents Matheson's registerial cartography. So basically, for example, if we take this one, we can see that from this particular data, sharing has the largest amount of percentages under the client of creativity, which means most instances are about sharing. And also where the sharings are prominent, we can see that usually it has a very high level of affective involvement, where power is mostly equal between interlocutors, and also the contact between these interlocutors are frequent. So in a sense that maybe family or friends, and when they are less, they have less power distance, they tend to be more capable or more willing to be creative in their speech. So we're still looking at speech, right? But then if we actually have videos, we can actually go from the speech and then look at other things as well. We can look at the locations that they're in, and then we can look at the type of conversations that they're in, and then we can do many parameters and multiple graphical plots, if you like, or generate other representations. But okay, but before that, let's just say, okay, now I am going to just simply plot something that is about social semiotic processes, and we look at percentages. So if we take that, and we can have these different proportions under the client of creativity, we can actually have different sizes for these semiotic processes by the percentages. And then if we also want, we can take another percentage and we can plot into a different or slightly different three-dimensional graph. For this one, we have actually used dimension reduction, because now we put all these numbers into the grid. So we have grid number 1 to grid number 12, and because then they all have their existing numbers, percentages, and percentages represent how often in your corpus or in my corpus that they appear to be creative. And so we can use number 1 to number 12, and then using the size of the sphere to represent the actual sizes, or the actual number on the percentage. So as you can see here, number 6 has the highest percentage of 35.23. And what that means is, in my corpus, or in this particular corpus, then the creativity mostly happen in high equality or collaborative idea, and in the professional settings, if you refer back to the table. And so basically, this is how the dimension is reduced, where we have actual numbers and data, and then later on we transform everything into just a diagram. So it really depends on what you're looking at. You can also have something like this. This is the one that is plotted, or well, not actually plotted, but created, a table that's created based on different talks, different locations where that happens, and also different semiotic, social semiotic processes by the percentages. So just showing various representation and possibilities here using the CIRCF framework. And as well, we can create something like a sunburst diagram, where we can have in the center circle, we can have different conversation type. And then in the next outer or middle outer circle, we have the locations where that happens. And then in the most outer circle would be who these creativity are addressing to. So basically who the creator is and who is the specific target. Now we have all these field and tenor all combined into one form of representation. So that was the CRLCF, where actually you can be very freely in terms of creating visualizations and possibilities, because there are so many different field modes and tenor variables or parameters you can have, so you can be very creative even with your visualizations. But that's mostly quantitative, as you can see. What about qualitative? What if I have something like a Twitter feed? In this case, here we have a Twitter tweet by Chase Jarvis, and he has just one line here. Remember, you can't stand out and fit in at the same time with 2 emojis and then 1 picture, and presumably taken by him. Then we need something of a qualitative analysis to handle this. So I have then come up with this AFCMT, Analytical Framework for Creativity in Multimodal Text. And so with this, I can analyze creativity that is beyond just words. Okay, and that's this one. I took the inspiration from, again, Carter and also Halliday, 1967, and I have created something called the IEEE matrix, also the client of creativity complexity. Right, okay, and now, so what happens is, first we have to identify there is a possibility, or if you like, you have already identified that as an instance of creativity, then you can start. What we do is ask 3 simple questions. What type of creativity does it belong to? If by means of type of creativity, we're looking at Carter's definition of that, whether it's pattern forming or pattern reforming. And then I will ask the second question is, what are the formula of creativity construction? Is implicit or explicit? This could be a bit tricky, but actually it's just the beginning that's tricky. After that, it's pretty simple. With example, I'll be able to illustrate this better. So let's keep that to the example a bit later. In terms of reference style, we have exo-reference or endo-reference, and this is taken from Halliday's 1967, and I think most of you are familiar with that. It's basically information status, new and given. And after we ask these 3 questions, we can then come to the client of creativity, or now it just in short form CCC, and then we check the level of that in difficulty or complexity in CCC. Right. So in CCC, there are 4 levels. And what that means is as we go up the climb, it's going to be more difficult for readers to understand. Level 1 is the easiest, when the creativity construction formula of that is explicit, and references are internal, or if you like, given. Then it's endo-reference, then it's level 1, so easiest. Followed by the next level that gets slightly difficult would be when it's still explicit, how the creativity is constructed, but it's exo-reference. So references that are new and are not explicitly given to the target. And then we go up, implicit and endo-reference, and implicit and exo-reference. So implicit and exo-reference are the most difficult because you don't know how the creativity is created, and you don't get any information given to you as you analyze certain image. So we're coming back to this one. This is by Chase Jarvis, and we can see mostly we look at the keyword first, and stand out and fit in. And we'll see that stand out and fit in actually forms a pattern with the image, because, well, we have the tree right at the top of the hill that stands out, and the tree is trying to fit into the environment. So these 2 are together, and therefore they are endo-referenced. They form pattern because the text and the image, they kind of pair together. But then in order to understand this picture, we need to know how the connections are formed, right? And connections are formed implicitly because Chase Jarvis never told us to, hey, stand out and fit in actually points to the tree. Go take a look at that one. So he never said that, therefore it's implicit. Now that's an easy example, but what about the more difficult examples? And it can be very difficult in this case. This is a tweet by Elon Musk talking about something something. As you can see on top, there's a sort of cloud, and what is that? Well, if we analyze it, then we see that this is a pattern reforming creativity. Why? Because that first emoji is dash, actually. And then the second one is a colorful purple dot dot dot. Is called a Milky Way emoji. So if you search for it, you have to search for a dash and Milky Way. And then that reforms the meaning of the emoji, because he's not talking about dashing. He's not talking about Milky Way. He's talking about air and space. Right. So that is, in a sense, is explicit enough for us to understand, because almost immediately you catch the meaning. Okay, so I have to look for not dash and Milky Way. I'm actually looking at airspace here. It's quite explicit. But and again, it's endo-reference, because how do you know that? It's, well, you have to look at multiple things, right? You look at the emojis, you look at the picture, you look at the word in there, so you get that meaning. But the meaning has been reformed in the sense that emojis are no longer called dash or Milky Way. So we will refer to the CCC level, it's CCC level 1. However, there are multiple things that's happening here. There's also the pattern forming, where you actually look at the picture and then you see, okay, there's air, there's space. An airspace museum, pointing to the sign there, is actually a connection, really not air and space, but air and space with aero and astral, right? And so that is an implicit kind of direction, and so is endo reference still. It's still with the picture, within the picture itself. And we're checking the CCC, it will be level 3. And then the third one, if you more careful, you can also see that, hey, the green, now a green box covering the circling around the Air and Space Museum, and that is how meaning has changed from air and space to aero and astral. So this is, on the sign alone, we have to understand there is a change of meanings, actually. And so that is implicit. Still, it's endo-reference. Finally, we have all the connections, everything together, where we connect the dots between emoji to the space that is inside the background picture. All that's air and space in there. And then connecting to the sign, and then the sign also connects back to the emoji. Then we actually come up and say, okay, so this final one will be pattern forming. It forms patterns all across the picture. It's implicit, obviously, because it's never, Elon never told you to look here, look here, look here, look here. And this is what I mean. He never said anything like that. But we find all that information endo-referencing within that one tweet. So as you can see, it can be...
Sorry, just to warn you, Locky, that the presentation times, if you want to have time for discussion, sure, that'd be great. Thanks. Cheers.
Okay. So here's the conclusion, basically. And so what basically has been completed in this talk, hopefully, will be that CIRCF and AFCMT form the basis of what I call the Digital Creativity Multimodal Analysis, DCMA. And these two tools are very useful SFL-based models and frameworks for analyzing creativity, and as well, if you like, the applied linguistics and SFL context. The third point is that they fill the research gap I've mentioned in this earlier on in this talk. And users need not be experts of SFL. If you remember that all the examples I've gone through, you basically need not know anything about SFL or need not be expert of SFL, but you can still apply these models, which is why it's very flexible and can be used by many people. And you can all use that to analyze different art as well. Then the next point is that it can be applied to a wide range of multimodal texts. As you can see, it can be applied to spoken, written, video, music, songs, artwork, graphics, images, digital creativity, or internet text. Finally, my final point would be it facilitates both quantitative and qualitative method of research. And that's the end of my talk. Here are some references, and then more references. And there you go. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for referencing Kate Poynton's work. It's so a lovely memorial to her, as you know, she died this year. So it's a very lovely, I love her work on tenor. It was very, very good. So I'm going to open up questions now. I know Margot's got a question. I know Amelia's got a question. So let's start. Oh no, Margot's got a finger up. So
I'm just giving Locky a thumbs up for his presentation.
Oh, terrific, terrific.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, we've just got about 5 minutes. So Amelia, I know you've got a question. Would you like to begin?
Yeah, thank you for a fascinating presentation. I'm still getting my head around it, and I will read your article as soon as I manage to get the time and the headspace to do that, because I'm a little bit scared now that, you've covered so much ground in half an hour that I'm not quite sure whether, what would be in the article in terms of, whether I have the capacity to deal with it. I was kind of wondering, you said that it's a very useful framework. And I wondered, whether you've already applied it for any sort of more applied questions. But I've also got some more theory-oriented questions. And one of them is whether you've thought about how your framework relates to the notions of markedness and foregrounding, both in terms of how they're used in SFL, but also more broadly in terms of their origins in the Prague School of Linguistics and Semiotics, for example. So I don't know if you wanted to handle the first question first, and then,
I try. But the first question was whether I've actually applied them. Well, yes, if you had the chance to watch this video again, basically I have actually published multiple journal articles and book chapters on that. So that everything is combined in one.
I probably wasn't quite clear. I was wondering whether it has been applied for solving any, sort of like actual problems in the world, I suppose. So, for example, assessing creativity, or I could see the applicability of it, the potential, but I wondered whether it's already been, sort of tested in,
Sure. I think the easiest way to look at it would be in terms of qualitative analysis. We can now use the AFCMT to look at what paintings actually mean to us. We have like SFL based framework, then we can use that and come up with what we normally look at paintings as a piece of how should we put it, multimodal text, and we can actually put that into a more applied linguistics way, or okay, let me just say that again. Basically, it's we can actually use that framework to now analyze, say, paintings, and we have a more systematic way, or a more easier way to explain why certain art pieces are more difficult to understand. I think that's the first one, because then we can now have the complexity. We can have the creativity complexity to explain what the four levels, and I think that would be the first contributions, if you like. And then if we want to go very deep, then we can also look at the CIRCF and see how that is applied to more specific components of analysis. Now, I did I answer certain questions? Sorry, because I'm really I'm kind of distracted because my
was very interested
asking me to leave.
That seems to be the first one, but I think Amelia had a question also about the relationship of the foregrounding. Was it, Amelia?
Yeah, sort of how do you see your framework relating to the notions of markedness and foregrounding, which are, in a way, well, as I see them as quite important for understanding creativity and, variations in style. So I wondered whether you've thought about that.
Yeah. So, well, the foregrounding part, according to Halliday's anti-language, was more focused on interpersonal meanings. And actually, in my research, when I first started, I used a textual corpus that actually has it's not actually textual corpus, but it's actually a television drama. And I worked with the scripts and dialogues. So I have the video and I have the text as well. So in that part, I've done a lot of work on foregrounding of interpersonal meaning from these two frameworks, but that would be like a super time-consuming thing to present here. But I can share a little bit of how that looks if you can see my screen actually. So because it's more of a quantitative approach, so I can tabulate all that, and I can calculate all that, and so in a sense, I'm also including corpus linguistics approaches to look at how interpersonal meanings are involved. So analyzing specific scenes, that's the television drama I use, and so I have various given like modes and interpersonal meanings and all that. I also look at proxemics, and so a lot of that is documented, but obviously not mentioned in this particular talk here. So I'm sorry, might not have enough time to explain, but yeah, it's already in some published articles that I showed in the reference list. So apologies, but I really need to run now because my daughter is going to go to school. So sorry everybody, and sorry to the first speaker.
All right, thank you so much, Locky, and thanks for being so flexible with your time. Take care, and we'll be
bye. I'll be back to attend the rest later on. See you. Bye. Sorry.